What water source are you going to use for your sprinkler? Are you going to be on well, or are you going to be on city? Or are you going to pump out of a lake? It all makes a huge difference in what we're going to do about and what we're going to talk about. But after we figure that out, our next thing we need to start thinking about is what pipe we're going to use. We're going to use Class 200 or we're going to use Schedule 40. And those two pipes are night and day. So guys, sit back. Let's learn about sprinklers.
No dry spots. We don't want no brown in our yards.
All right, so what we're going to do is talk about Schedule 40 and Class 200. The Schedule 40 is twice as thick as Class 200. But whenever I'm doing a yard, I go through and I put everything Schedule 40 just because I don't want to have problems.
All right, well, this is a prime example of Class 200 and Schedule 40. Right here, there's the thickness of Schedule 40, right here. And look at the difference in Class 200. That is the difference. But now look at what happened when they were doing some work in a yard. This one, when they hit it, they yanked it, that they didn't break it. Now, I mean, this was hit with a backhoe, and this is very excessively hit. I mean, it got damaged, but that's Schedule 40. Now, look what happened to the Class 200. It ripped it, and it smashed it. So this was actually driven on in a yard. And so that got drove on, and then this one they actually drove on it, and then they yanked it out of the yard. So it had a real rough life. But you can see how it actually smashed. But now look at how much work and how much effort it just takes a beating. And look at the difference again and how much thicker the Schedule 40 is. So that's the main difference of why I like to use Schedule 40.
I assume in my heart that there's somebody going to be driving through that yard in a vehicle, and I don't want my pipes to get crushed. So that's the reason I do it. And in the overall scheme of everything, it's easier to cut. It lasts. You don't have the issues. I mean, it's just an all-around much better way of doing it. Now, there is 3 different ways that you can get water. You can pump it out of the lake, which is a very common area. So if you have a lake in your backyard, that's pretty common. Another way is out of a well, and the well is another good way of doing it. Now, the third option is off a city water, and that's what I normally work off of. We have a few systems. I'm going to show you a system that we're working on in a few weeks that right now is off a well. Now, we're not going to show you today. I may have a clip or two, but we're still working on it. It's a monster system, and it's actually on city and well. So it's kind of a unique animal, but we will go over that in a later date. But today, let's talk about city. And the reason that I'm bringing up the 3 different water sources, there's only one downside to all of them, is sediment. And basically, if you're in a lake situation or a well, you're going to have iron in the well, possibly. Around here we do anyways. In Russellville, Arkansas, we have a lot of iron, things like that, and we also have a lot of sand. And so what we've got to watch about on these sprinkler heads, if you're going to use certain heads, and where I'm going with this is any type of sprinkler head that you've got, some heads are better with water and some are better with other water. So if you're doing a rotor, a PGP or a Rainbird 5000, a Toro, any of those type of rotors, if you're going to do any type of rotors, any of that, they can handle a lot more sediment because the orifices in them that it just handles it, and it's not a big deal. So it works out pretty nice. Now, if you're doing a MP 500 or an MP nozzle for a spray head, well, by George, you do not want to have those on well water, lake water, because any sediment in those will clog those up because they're such a fine mist. But now, also, most of your pop-ups don't handle well water and all that real well, because to just get well water around here anyways has iron, and it builds up in there and it clogs up the filters fairly quickly. Pop-ups are generally used in bed areas or tight areas that you don't, or along sidewalks in between grass areas. You can adjust the spray pattern to different patterns. Now, rotors, what they generally are out in the yard, they will actually cover 30-foot areas. So you can squeeze them up to maybe 40 if you're really doing good. But typically, we put them on 30 to 35-foot spacing, head-to-head coverage. Now, if you've ever heard of head-to-head coverage, all that means is that the water hits the other sprinkler head. So a lot of people think that they can, oh, my head will spray 30 feet. Well, I can go 60 feet. And so they space them out too far, which, you know, in a perfect world and get a little bit of rain showers, it'll work out fine. But if it starts to get dry at all, you're going to have brown spots in your yard like nobody's business. So what you want to do is you want to set these up in a fashion that everything's on 30 foot on center. So basically what I do is I put a head at 30 foot, I put my next head at 30 foot. Now there's two ways that you can work this. And sometimes you can put them as a square box.
Okay, so you can put a sprinkler here, a sprinkler here, one here, one here, one here, and one here.
Now, if you want to put them on what a lot of times I do is I space them out half off. So basically my first row is at 30, my next one's at a 45-degree angle in the middle of the other two.
So now this is another method you could use with 5 sprinklers. So you would have one in the middle of the two and then another one in the middle of these two. Full head-to-head coverage. So it's like overlapping and like making sure that the grass is getting plenty of water. No dry spots. We don't want no brown in our yards.
That's how I set my sprinklers up 9 times out of 10. It just gives you a better, I think it looks better, and it gives you a little better coverage. And covers, make sure you don't have any dead spots. Because I tell you what, you talking about getting people excited. If you don't have, in those dry times, if you got a dry spot, you do not want that. Is a Rainbird valve. Now, there's Hunter valves that are fine. I just prefer Rainbird. I've used them for years. So that's kind of what I use. But now there are several different styles of Rainbird valves that you can get. You can get threaded. Threaded, all that means is you have to put a male adapter or some type of threaded pipe into the valve. And that's all there is. No thread, threaded. That's the first thing that you're going to need to figure out. Do you want to thread or do you want to glue? I glue them in. What I've found over the years is if there's a problem, I'm gonna have to cut them out anyways because there's just not enough room to back them out. So I just glue them and throw them away. Some people prefer to rebuild them, thread them, and over the years, I've just kind of gotten away from that. I guess I'm lazy, but it's just a little simpler for me to do that. Now, the other thing that you've got on that is a flow control. Flow control and all that is basically controls the flow of a valve and how much water it actually lets go through the water. So those are your main two basics that you've got on a valve. All right, I wanted to show you a different type of head that you could use right off PVC. So this little adapter right here, so this adapter right there, it actually will go straight to your nozzle. So this nozzle is what you could do is you actually can use a riser. So this riser already has it threaded on this end, threaded on this end. Then you simply apply that to it and you put a piece of PVC in the ground and you've got an automatic head. Super simple. This is a real simple way of doing a project. We do a lot of this in commercial areas. We don't need pop-ups and things like that. But this works really well in flower beds and different areas. If you need to raise, let's say one of your plants has gotten taller, you can raise one of these as high as you need to spray over or around plants. It's a nice, simple, easy way to adjust your sprinkler without a lot of problem. Next thing we've got to talk about is wire. And what are we going to use? How many valves are we going to have in our system? So basically, when we start laying these out, this is a very general rule. Now, you need to check your water pressure, you need to do all that, and your flow. But as a general rule, I'm typically, when I get to a yard, I'm assuming that I can run 6 rotors on a head. That's, basically what I think that we can do. Now, every once in a while, if you don't have good pressure or water flow, that's a variable and you may have to change it. But that's just kind of my general rule I start. I mean, I've got some systems I can run 8 heads. I've got some systems I can run 4. And I'm not going to get into a lot about that because that's pretty technical. We're just kind of breezing over the top of these things as a general rule and easy. Now, if you guys have comments or that or want to know about that, hit me up and I will be more than happy to tell you the exact specs and all that kind of stuff. But the general person, I don't think you guys would want to know about all that stuff, so we'll just keep it simple. All right, now, if you're going to do that, you need to count how many zones you're going to have. And a zone is essentially one section of heads. So let's say that we've got out in our front yard, we've got one section of 6 heads. That is one zone. All right. Now, we also need to figure out how many other zones we're going to have so we can have a wire. But you've got to also add one extra wire to it. So let's say that we're going to have 5 zones in our front yard. All right, so if we have 5 zones, that means we got to have 6 wires, because you're going to have a common wire that goes to every one. Now, what I do with my common wire, my commons are white, and that's just the way I do it. Now, you can pick any color you want, but I just do white, and so that's kind of an electrical code deal. You know, when you're doing anything, white's always your common, so that's kind of why I do it on my sprinklers. So if anybody walks up to my system, they should know what's going on. So, now the other thing on this, are you going to put a master valve on your system? I think is probably one of the more essential things that you have to have, especially today. The way utilities and water and everything else are getting so expensive, a master valve, all that is a little extra safety. So what it is, whenever it comes out of the water source before the backflow, it actually will sit there and it only gives pressure to the system if the clock is running. So if your clock is off, the master valve is turned off. So that is the way I do all my systems. It's cheap insurance. If you ever have a leak or anywhere that's spewing water, I tell you what, and you're going for the weekend, you can rack up a bill quick. For a few dollars, you can have a valve set there and have some peace of mind. I mean, you literally, instead of having your whole system live all the time, you could have a 6 or 8 or 10, 5 foot of pipe that's alive, and your chances of something exploding right there are so minimal that you're pretty well safe. And then that will leave the rest of the system dead. All right, let's say we've got 6 zones in the front, and when we've got to have one common wire for all the valves. The white wire, which I use, actually goes to every valve, and that's when the clock signals. That's what makes a circuit. So that's how those operate. So you're gonna have one extra wire, and then if we're gonna put a master valve on our system, that puts us up to 8. So we're gonna have 8 wires in our system. So we need to kind of plan on that. Now, if you ever think that you're going to go and do an expansion, or if you're doing a part of your yard and you think you might want to go ahead and do another section, tell you what, sometimes you can go up to a 13 strand. If you think you're ever going to need it, that's the time to do it. You talking about a pain going back across your yard trying to add a wire. That is an issue.
Tell you what, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I hope y'all learned something. But if there's something else that you want to know or any questions, feel free to hit me up and we'll cover it. But guys, I think that's where we're going to end it for this video. I sure appreciate it. Y'all have a great week. I'll see you on the next one.